4 years later, summer of 1794. Over the past 4 years, Jin has become a knight cadet of the second rank. Garen Altamir informed Jin that the training was over. Garen was a guardian knight of the House of Rankandel, who trains low-ranking cadets. Garen also reminded Jin that Lunar Rankandel planned to train him. Jin had almost forgotten about it. He decided to have a snack first. Will Jin be having lunch with the cadets again? Garen said that Madame Rosa would be upset. Jin sighed. He didn't want to play peekaboo with his brothers and sisters while eating. Garen said he understood. He will inform Rosa Rankandel about it. The servant started bringing food to the training ground. It was a huge pot of rice, vegetables, and meat. The food was simple and rough enough, but the ingredients were first class. Cadets stood in line, waiting for food to be distributed. Jin didn't follow them, as Belop was in charge of his food. Belop Schmitz, a low-ranking knight cadet, a 13-year-old boy, a commoner, a year younger than Jin. Due to a lag in training, he was stripped of his rank and expelled. At least, that was the case before Jin's regression. Jin asked him if it was delicious. Belop was very grateful to the Rankandel family that he could eat such wonderful meat. Belop was especially grateful to the young master, because he was always ready to share meat with him. Because Belop wasn't going to stop himself, Jin had to tell him to stop talking. Belop said the same thing yesterday. Jin asked if he had memorized it. Belop blushed a little with embarrassment. Jin said that Belop should learn to behave more carefully, because he says what's on his mind. Everyone looks down on him. Jin told him to straighten his shoulders and raise his head higher. Belop needs to be a little more confident. Belop must not forget that he is a knight cadet of the House of Rankandel. Belop replied that he had terrible grades. He didn't even reach the first rank. Jin sighed and replied that it was very difficult to become even a cadet. No matter how bad his grades were, he's still better than his peers who didn't get here. Belop was so pure and sincere that Jin would not be surprised if even his relatives bullied him. Jin asked himself one question. How did someone so pure, trained by the swordmaster Karin, become a loyal dog of the Bement Empire, turned into a ruthless killer? When Jin found out that Belop had become an imperial bodyguard, he was shocked, and when he found out that he had committed suicide, he was upset. Jin looked around. After making sure no one else was looking in their direction, he quickly passed some of his food to Belop. He said he wasn't hungry, so Belop could finish eating. Jin will personally make sure that Belop is not kicked out this time. He's already dead. Jin won't repeat his mistakes again. The release of shadow energy is the second rank, mana is the fourth, fencing is the second. Everything was going well. At this rate, in a couple of years he will reach the third rank in fencing. Jin was Luna's favorite little brother. She said that today they will continue yesterday's training. However, this time everything will be somewhat different. She told Jin that the heart is his eyes. He must look with his heart. Jin has never heard of such a workout, but apparently he has no choice. For those who live by fencing, it is extremely important to open the inner vision. Luna told him not to open his eyes. Only knights who had reached the 7th rank could comprehend inner vision, and she wanted to teach someone who had recently received only the 2nd. In addition, usually inner vision was achieved by scattering the aura, but during training with the moon, he could not use the aura. However, Jin obeyed his older sister's instructions and kept his eyes closed because he knew her identity. Moreover, she was widely known as the strongest among the 13 Rankandel children. If any of the other brothers and sisters had started teaching Jin, as Luna was doing now, he would have thought that they were trying to prevent his growth with some nonsense. Or maybe they have become fanatics of some kind of pseudo-religion. Jin decided to trust her. He was sure she had thought of something. He focused on training. He was sure that someday he would figure out how to do it. They stood facing each other, eyes closed, until evening came. When their lesson was over, Luna smiled. She praised him. He could be coming back. Jin had no idea what he had done well, so he could only nod at her statement. When Jin started to leave, Luna was thinking, looking at his back. Jin showed a concentration unusual for knights of the 2nd rank. She was sure that with such potential, he would understand everything in a couple of years. Luna smiled contentedly. Cadets gathered at the training ground. Today they will have sparring matches, so there was a strange mood between them. The results of the duels were very important for their overall scores and rating, and higher scores would give them a bigger scholarship and the opportunity to become a knight guardian with special treatment. No wonder all the cadets were on edge. Karen said that today was an important day for Jin as well. His mother, Rosa Rankandel, said that if he defeats 10 opponents with a higher rank, he will be able to start training in an advanced group from next year. This was great news for Jin. Jin turned his attention to the corner where Belop was standing. As expected, the cowardly boy looked around nervously. He reminded Jin of a small prey that barely escaped from a predator and hid in a small hole. Jin needs to do something to prevent Belop from being kicked out, but Belop still lacked confidence. Garen arrived at the training ground, and the cadets immediately got in line. After a simple warm-up and physical exercises, Garen announced the sparring order and schedule. Today they will fight 3 opponents in turn. The top 10 will fight one-on-one with Jin. There wasn't a single cadet in Garen's class who could beat Jin. Therefore, whenever sparring took place, Jin fought several duels more than others. Duels began. Their duels were quite good. The training was not in vain. These sparring sessions continued for another 2 hours, and finally it was Jin's turn. Among the 24 winners, Garen chose the top 10. Jin grabbed a wooden sword and faced his first opponent. Jin quickly finished this duel, as there were still 9 sparring sessions left. Jin won 8 in his previous life, but this one needs 2 more. Jin lightly swung his wooden sword, waiting for the next opponent. Jin's next opponent was Meza Milkano, Knight Cadet of the House of Rankandel. The usual group. Meza Milkano is one of the few who, after completing her training, will become a Guardian Knight. The battle with her is the most important moment in the test. Meza promised that she would beat Jin, no matter what it cost her. Jin nodded, saying he was looking forward to it. Meza attacked first. Jin noted that she was even stronger than before, but it wasn't enough to defeat him. True, he will have to fight 8 more, but holding back his strength and energy in front of Meza is a bad idea. Jin needs to defeat her in a direct clash to sow fear in the minds of his next opponents. Jin planned to plant a thought in the minds of the other cadets during his duel with Meza, that they would never be able to defeat Jin in a head-on battle. This time, Jin was the first to make a move. His attacks consisted of the simplest and chopping blows. Not a single wrong or strange movement was added. Meza easily parried and dodged his attacks. But as the offensive continued, her thoughts became complicated and heavy. Why does he only hit her with ordinary punches? Before that, he demonstrated a wide variety of techniques. Although these were standard attacks, every move was heavy and sharp. Meza's hands and wrists were numb from parrying them all. However, that wasn't the reason her mind was confused. While Meza was racking her brain, Jin continued to swing the wooden sword with a calm expression on his face, even when Meza twisted her body to avoid his series of simple attacks. He still stuck to the basics. Did he underestimate her, thinking that she was incapable of defeating him? Meza gritted her teeth and stamped on the ground to stabilize her position. As soon as Meza took a pose and gripped her wooden sword tightly, her anxiety disappeared. She also started using only the simplest attacks to counter Jin. Soon, all the bizarre techniques and complex movements completely disappeared from their duel. Each of them took turns attacking and defending. It was a very simple fight, a simple brute force battle. She wouldn't let Jin push her away. This time she decided to surpass Jin. Suddenly, Meza screamed loudly, lowering her wooden sword. She tried to regain full control of her emotions, but this was the reason for her defeat. Jin didn't dodge the blow that contained all of Mesa's strength and took it head-on. Mesa expected him to step back to evade her attack, so she planned to quickly rush forward to deliver the final blow. The wooden sword she swung down with all her might shattered when Jin's sword deflected it. How is it? When Meza subconsciously asked herself this question, Jin's wooden sword had already reached her neck, waiting a few millimeters away from her skin. Jin told her that the fight was great. While he calmly answered, Jin's forehead was wet with sweat. Then Meza turned her gaze to her broken sword. It was neither a trick nor an illusion. Jin didn't use the aura, so why did only her wooden sword break? Watching Jin head to one side of the training ground to get a new wooden sword, Meza finally understood the reason for this phenomenon. Every observer believed that the duel between Jin and Mesa was a brute force duel without any intricate or complicated techniques. However, there was one hidden truth in the battle. While Jin and Meza exchanged blows one after the other, the boy aimed at the center of Meza's blade each time. On the other hand, Mesa's attacks affected the entire surface of Jin's wooden blade. Jin's determination to break Mesa's sword is against Mesa's determination to face him head-on in a head-on battle. Mesa's broken wooden sword was by no means an accident. She thought it was a battle of brute force, but in fact it was a battle of precision. There wasn't much difference in their strength and endurance. However, the reason for her loss was the difference in their accuracy and perseverance. She confidently declared that she would devote herself completely to training and would definitely win. She didn't want to lose anymore. Everything was going according to Jin's plan. After the duel with Mesa, Jin met with the remaining 8 cadets. However, he was able to defeat them without much difficulty. No one else has come face to face with him like Meza. Therefore, none of them could steal control of the battle from Jin. When the last opponent fell in front of Jin, all the other cadets gulped loudly. In their eyes, Jin easily defeated all the rivals after Mesa. However, it wasn't as easy as it seemed. Facing 10 extremely talented cadets one after another, Jin was a little out of breath after his last battle. Jin made an example out of Mesa not only to save his energy as much as possible, because he was afraid that he would not be able to defeat all 10 cadets. After the 10th victory, Garen came up to him with his congratulations. Jin will be taught by real Rankandels from next year. Jin thanked Garen, saying that he was counting on him for now. It was already time for lunch. Garen invited Jin to sum up the results of the morning workout. Jin asked how much time they had. Garen replied that there were about 10 minutes left. Jin told him he wanted to fight another one. Jin suddenly shouted Belop's name, to which Belop instinctively stood up. The eyes of all the cadets instantly turned to Belop. Jin told Belop that he couldn't survive in the Rankandel family that way. Jin ordered him to come out and fight him. He promised that he would destroy it. Belop stood in front of Jin, clutching the hilt of his wooden sword, cold sweat streaming down his face. He hadn't received this much attention since becoming a guard cadet, which explained his restlessness. The other watching cadets could already see Belop's soul slipping away while Jin's gaze continued. Everyone involuntarily recalled the words spoken by the boy from Rankandel to the coward. You won't be able to survive in this family if you continue to behave like this. Belop wondered why Jin had summoned him. Because he's weak. Jin wanted to teach him military discipline. Such questions flashed through Belop's mind. Jin's gaze was fixed on Belop, and he tightened his grip on the sword. Jin called Belop's name again. Belop nervously answered loudly. Restrained, contemptuous laughter rang out among the audience, but the cadets who reacted immediately corrected their expressions and attitudes, as they were afraid that Garen would punish them. However, not to mention Garen, even Jin didn't look at them and kept his eyes on Belop. Jin said that he was quite tired from all the battles, and Belop, on the contrary, was full of energy. Jin said that despite this, he was still stronger, which is why he called Belop. Belop wanted to ask something, but Jin instantly closed the distance between them. His wooden sword flew to Belop's shoulder, but the latter somehow managed to avoid the blow at the last second, despite the panicked footwork. After that, the attacks continued non-stop, like an endless river. Belop parried and avoided the sword by retreating. Jin unexpectedly praised him for his good blocks. Jin suddenly threw a handful of sand at Belop's face on the training ground. He started rubbing his eyes, and therefore his stance became unstable. Jin kicked him on the shin, which caused Belop to let out a groan of pain and fell to the ground. Belop asked in a trembling voice about what Jin was doing. Jin walked over to the seated Belop, who could barely open his eyes. He said that he had not summoned him for the sake of a simple fight. Jin wanted to fight it with Belop. Jin pointed his sword at Belop, saying he could kill him. He ordered Belop to get up. He won't spare him anymore. Jin turned around and started to increase the distance between them again. Belop lowered his head and took a deep breath before getting up and taking up the wooden sword. The cadets who had been watching until now began to wonder if Jin was really abnormal. No matter how stupid and cowardly Belop was, the young master had gone too far. At least that's what some observers thought. Belop's wooden sword shone with an aura. It was pale and dim, but nevertheless a real aura. Even with such a small amount of aura, the swordsman's slashing power would increase exponentially and become deadly. The weakest in the class, the eternal loser. This boy suddenly had an aura, so the cadets were shocked and confused. At this speed, one of the two fighters could potentially die during this duel. Meza asked Garen to stop the duel. If this continues, Jin may suffer. Jin turned to Garen, saying that they should take to the grave what they were about to see. Garen could only meekly agree. Belop asked if that was what Jin wanted. However, his face was no longer tinged with fear. He seemed depressed, but furious. Jin nonchalantly replied that he shouldn't hold back since he had an aura. Belop clenched his teeth in anger. He said Jin had made a terrible mistake. If he wanted to fight him, then he should have acted earlier. Belop made the move first. He instantly swept across the field and appeared in front of Jin with surprisingly agile movements. Jin blocked Belop's heavy wooden punch, but Jin's sword broke under the pressure. Jin knew that Belop was strong, but he had no idea that he was so strong. During training sparring sessions, he always managed to understand the opponent's strategy, evaluate his skills, and then deliberately lost. Jin had no idea that Belop already possessed an aura. A sudden heavy blow landed on Belop's arm, causing the sword to fly away. As the sword flew away, the recoil shook Belop's body. Losing his balance and support, Jin quickly grabbed him from behind and strangled him. Belop could do nothing but struggle for a breath of air as he was being strangled from behind. After a while, Jin removed his hands himself. Belop was coughing and gasping for air. Belop turned to Jin with a displeased look. He was asking why Jin stopped. If he wanted a decent fight, then it's worth fighting to the end. He asked Jin if he liked playing with people like that. Belop's pent-up anger burst out. Jin shook his head. He replied that it was unpleasant for him to provoke Belop himself. He had no idea how much. Belop was still offended when he asked about what Jin knew about him to persist so much. Jin got down on one knee, saying he didn't know anything about him. But one thing he knew for sure, to be kind and caring, you need to be strong. Belop was weaker than Jin, but kinder at the same time. Of course, Jin liked it in Belop, but in this hell, the good will not survive. Jin stopped and put his hand on the boy's shoulder. Belop raised his head and their eyes met. Jin asked Belop to become stronger in order to protect the good together with him and the others. He also apologized for his rudeness. While Jin was talking, the other cadets couldn't utter a sound. As a result, Belop's crying and tearful sobs could be heard everywhere. Suddenly, servants appeared at the training ground, carrying large pots of soup and with a lot of bread in boxes. While the servants were hesitating what to do, Jin told them to bring in the food. Belip told Jin to go to lunch. Jin grinned, saying that he would bring a portion for him. The strongest knight in the world, Rankandel. After he greeted his youngest son in the Garden of Swords 4 years ago, he immediately left for the Black Sea again. The question that the boy had once asked was still spinning in his head. Is God stronger than him? He can be stronger than God. The monsters of the Black Sea did not attack Shiren. They didn't even get close to the center of the Black Sea, where Shiren was sitting now. This was their method of preserving the natural ecosystem. Eating and being eaten. Shiren really liked the simplicity of this system, which is why he came to the Black Sea so often. A few days ago, a knight was looking for him on the Black Sea. The knight in question fought and killed countless monsters and bathed in their blood to see Shiren. It was a knight of the 9th rank Khan. Shiren did not turn to face him, but simply opened his eyes. He was sitting cross-legged. Khan approached him, wiping the blood from his armor. Then he reported with a frozen face, and Shiren waited with a straight face until Khan finished speaking. However, in the middle of the report, the corners of Shiren's lips lifted in a grin. So that's what his youngest son said. The content of Khan's report was the details of the outrage in the beginner class caused by Jin's recent action. Although Garen said he would not disclose the details of the incident to other Rankandels, he could not keep it a secret from the head of the family. Therefore, he informed Khan, Shiren's right-hand man, about the incident. However, he didn't say anything to other people. Garen wasn't afraid of the current genie, but he was afraid of the future boy. Shiren suddenly burst out laughing loudly. He understood what Jin's beliefs were. Did he want to rule by force and help the weak? In this case, you need to understand whether this approach is beneficial to their family. A wide smile appeared on Shiren's face. In recent years, he had laughed so much more than ever after reaching the demigod realm. Shiren ordered Han to return and tell Jin that it was time for him to go on his first mission. As a result, Khan had to spend a few more days getting out of the Black Sea and fighting monsters to pass on the order of the head of the family. January 1795. Jin, who is now 15 years old, has become a 3-star knight and was enjoying his last rest in the beginner training group. The first holidays have begun. The cadets either left for their hometowns and villages, or stayed to continue individual training. When they move to the advanced group, then you can forget about wooden swords. They will have to use personal swords made especially for them. Some cadets have already given instructions regarding their swords. Jin wanted a sword suitable for him in the armory, but Luna would choose his sword because she wanted it that way. In any case, Luna was much better at recognizing good swords than the current Jin, so he had nothing to lose by accepting her offer. He decided to trust her in this matter. Luna took a huge axe sword from her back and put it on the floor. It was a different sword compared to her favorite Krantel. Jin couldn't help but look confused. The axe sword that the moon had laid down seemed even bigger than himself. On the other hand, Luna's eyes were shining with impatience. She explained some points about this sword. He was called the Veil Killer. Luna often used one at Jin's age. Then she wanted to use something like a sword axe of a similar shape. The form of the Krantel with which she fought came from him. She asked Jin if he liked this sword. The moon spoke with innocent eyes full of hopes and expectations. A shiver ran down Jin's spine as he coughed awkwardly. He replied that he was grateful to her for her help with choosing a sword, but it was unlikely that such a sword would suit him. The joyful and hopeful mood of the moon immediately disappeared. She smiled grimly as a gloomy atmosphere formed around her. She said it was a joke. It didn't sound like a joke though, but Jin didn't dare say those words out loud. For a few more seconds, Luna cherished the impossible dream that Jin would take her sword. However, she soon gave up and took a deep breath. She understood him. He will have another sword. She really tried, choosing him. I thought which one would suit him best. Which sword would suit only him. And then she thought of him. Since Jin chose Barasada at the selection ceremony, this sword will suit him best. The sword that the moon showed was in a neat, black scabbard without a single ornament or decoration. He seemed ordinary, but when Jin received the sword from Luna, his eyes trembled. When he grabbed the handle and pulled, a snow-white blade appeared in his field of vision. Jin admired the clean, unpainted sword as he mentally shouted out the name of the weapon. He looked at the multicolored reflection that shone like a star diamond, with a look as if he was head over heels in love. Bradamante. He is the brother of Barasada, the blade that Temur Rankandel once used. With the exception of Barasada, there were very few swords in the Rankandel arsenal that surpassed Bradamante. Luna noted that Jin seemed to like the sword. You bet. This sword was unique. Even other swords from the family collection can't compare with it. Jin would do anything to get him. To think that the moon had chosen Bradamante for him. Bradamante and Barasada are best compatible with the energy of shadows. If Jin had chosen it himself, the brothers and sisters would have resisted. Others also wanted Bradamante. Jin said he didn't even know how to thank her for it. Something didn't add up here. Luna said she thought Jin was uncomfortable with her. It upset her. Jin quickly began to justify himself, saying that he didn't mean that. but she was already upset, so he would have to comfort her. She told him to close his eyes to start training. She wanted him to remember one thing. Among all the brothers and sisters trying to trample each other, there are those who disinterestedly love him. He should remember this well and not upset her anymore. She had already spent enough time alone. Long before he was born, Luna wanted Jin to understand that she didn't want Jin to be alone like she had once been. Jin decided not to question Luna's goodwill and love from now on. It's true that this kind-hearted sister turned a blind eye to Jin and his suffering in his first life, but Jin was ready to turn the page and forget about her past neglect of him. Jin showed his new sword to Muraken. Muraken didn't even turn away from reading the comic. He told Jin to put the sword away. It was too early for him to use it. He has not mastered the energy of shadows enough. To properly use Bradamante, shadow energy must be at least of the 3rd rank, and Jin is still a 2nd rank brat. He won't even be able to awaken the sword. Jin didn't agree with that. In his opinion, he will soon reach the 3rd rank, and will be able to use Bradamante. Muraken forcefully closed the comic book in his hands and stared at Jin. Muraken was displeased with Jin's carelessness. He told Jin to listen to him carefully. Parasada and Bradamante could not be used at random. We needed the energy of the shadows of the 3rd rank, and this is the minimum. Muraken insisted that he use an ordinary sword until his strength reached the 5th rank. Jin removed Muraken's hand, saying that he did not like to wait long. You just need to reach the 5th rank in a year. From these words, the veins on Muraken's head swelled. It was impossible, even if Jin wins the shadow energy contest or absorbs it. Muraken said all this because he was worried about him. Jin said such nonsense that even dogs would laugh at him. Muraken demanded that Jin no longer talk such nonsense. Jin grabbed Muraken's comic book with difficulty. He started threatening Muraken with this, saying that he would tear up the comic. The quarreling duo stopped and turned to Jilly, who was running towards them. She seemed to be in a hurry. She reported that Coach Garen had called Jean to his office. Garen was supposed to come in person, but he said he had to explain the task strategy to Jin, show everything on the map, so Jin would have to go. Garen will help him in the first task. Jilly said he'd be moving out as soon as he rested. They had recently been awarded the 3rd rank, so it was about time. But it was strange that they would move out after the rest. Jilly assumed that this was due to the complexity of the task. Usually, such tasks were assigned from an advanced group and above. Jilly was full of worry. Jin only said that he had apparently proved that he was worthy. He told Gilly to wait here with Muraken while he found out everything. There were already 4 cadets in Garen's office. Garen smiled faintly at Jin's appearance. With the arrival of Jin, Garen began to explain everything. Only 10 cadets from the regular group, including Jin, received this assignment. They will be divided into 2 groups. This is a search task. They will go to the southern border of the Jin Kingdom. The Jin Kingdom was not far from the land of monsters. It was located near the base of the White Wolf tribe. Travelers avoid this area, and mercenaries hate it. Jin thought about it. Low-ranking cadets should not be sent here. It's quite difficult for the first task, and they were given out earlier than it should be. The squad included cadets with average performance, and Bellup, whose grades constantly fluctuated. It seemed to him that someone had deliberately arranged everything. Had his father been informed of his battle with Bellup and decided to test him like that, Jin became more serious. He will show his father what he is capable of. After all, his beliefs are unshakable. 3 days later, the southern border of the Jin Kingdom. They must find Sember Villa, the heir of the Villa family from the Jin Kingdom. As soon as they arrive, they will set up camp in the central section of the border. After that, each squad will go in search of Sember Villa. Every day, at the designated time, a selected person from each squad will come to the camp to share information with the rest. Jin ordered them to call him commander, not master. The injured must remain in the camp until they fully recover. That was it. They could only hope that their target was still alive. Bellup reported that Eddington had spotted a monster from the Watertail tribe. The Watertail tribe is an obedient and gentle tribe that fishes in rivers or seas using their harpoon-shaped tails. They cannot be found in areas inhabited by the White Wolf tribe, so they won't run into the White Wolf tribe. Because of the snowfall, Bellup couldn't walk fast, so Jin told him to leave 2 hours earlier. After that, he will need to return to Sector 13. Jin ordered the others to start searching in Sector 13. Jin had a bad feeling. His father had personally assigned them this task, but everything was going too smoothly. Perhaps he misunderstood everything, and this is a simple task, not a test. There were also no incidents in Sector 13, and they could not find any clues about the missing person. The only special incident that happened was that they were presented with fried fish by beastmen from the Watertail tribe, which they found by coincidence. Jin thanked them, saying that he would definitely repay them for their kindness. Beyond Sector 13 begins the land of the beastmen. Cadets from an ordinary group are no match for them. Jin came to the conclusion that it is not worth straining for the sake of results. For the next 3 days, he will only confirm the results of searches in each of the sectors. Belop finally returned from the camp. He was in such a hurry that he completely forgot to call him captain. The preparing cadets got up and also rushed to Belop. Belop reported that the second squad was ambushed. Jin quickly ordered the others to get ready to move out. Meanwhile, Belop continued his report. The second squad dispersed to get away from the enemy. Only one of them was able to get to the camp and tell about what happened. The ambush wasn't set up by beastmen, but by humans. Only 3 people. Jin didn't expect the cadets to be attacked by humans, not beastmen. Belop was confused. Why would they attack the Rankandels with such a small force? Jin concluded that there were a lot more of them. He ordered Eddington and David to return to the camp to guard it and the surrounding area. Jin also forbade making contact with the enemy upon detection. If something happens, the first thing they have to do is report first. As they hurriedly ran, Jin thought about the whole situation. A lot of people could have ambushed them. But what is their purpose? Why did they attack the second squad and not the first, in which Jin didn't know who they were, but he personally made them pay for daring to touch the Rankandels. Soon they found blood and traces of battle. Belop assumed the worst. Maybe Meza and the second squad are already dead. Jin calmed Belop down. The blood was fresh. There are no signs of a fall, no pieces of flesh. Here they fought, but the second squad escaped. Judging by the tracks, they were attacked by only one person. Sierra reported that she found someone's bandages. Jin quickly joined Sierra and saw a strip of bandage. It was definitely made in Hufester. She found them on the west side. Jin came to the conclusion that while the second squad was bandaging the wounded man, they were attacked by someone else, and they had to flee to the west. Jin ordered Sierra to go to Eddington and David to explain everything. He took Belop with him and ran after the tracks. The hasty pursuit of Jin and Belop was crowned with success. After about 30 minutes of the chase, they heard a noise in the distance. Belop noticed the sounds too. They both stopped on their way to find the source. When the two sneaked through the trees and approached the source of the noise, they were finally able to check on the cadets of the second group. They were in the middle of a fight in the middle of the forest. None of them suffered fatal injuries, such as the loss of limbs, but all had minor injuries, such as small cuts on the body. They saw 3 cadets, but Mesa was not with them. There were 2 masked enemies. After seeing their movements, Jin came to the conclusion that they were indeed 4-star warriors. Jin told Belop to close his eyes and attack in 2 seconds of the one on the left. Why did Jin tell him to close his eyes in such a situation? Belop was not the type to ask himself such questions. If the young master had ordered him to close his eyes, he would have closed his eyes. As soon as Belop did this, Jin coated the dagger with shadow energy. Shadow energy could enhance the cutting and destructive power of such weapons, as well as aura. However, it had another effect. When the weapon is covered with shadow energy, the presence of the object becomes less significant. Therefore, it could significantly increase the chances of success of a surprise attack, especially if the dagger was thrown accurately without making a sound. Jin dropped the darkened dagger. The blade cut through the wind, sweeping over the forest, and stabbed into the back of the right enemy's head. The attacker, who was brandishing a sword, immediately stopped. But before his ally on the left could even turn his head to check on him, Belop ran up behind him and stabbed him in the back with his sword. The attacker quickly noticed the attack and turned to parry Belop's sword, but Jin's subsequent sudden attack cut his Achilles tendon. Jin did not immediately take the attacker's life and hit him on the back of the head and temple with the hilt of his sword. When the enemy fell to the ground in a semi-conscious state, Jin pressed his knee to the back of his head and completely suppressed him. The cadets of the second group ran up to Jin. Relief and hope for survival were reflected on their faces, but they were soon replaced by despair that they had disrupted the very first mission of the young master. They were fine, but Mesa was captured. They felt guilty about it. Jin didn't blame them. He told them to take care of himself. Jin exhaled deeply, grabbed the surviving attacker by the hair and took off his mask. It was the face of a 30-year-old man he had never seen before. The man immediately began to beg for mercy. Jin replied that for a follower of Zippel's, he valued life too much. Jin gave the man a choice, or he will tell you who they are, what their purpose and base are. Then only he will die, or he will keep his mouth shut. And Jin will kill not only him, but also his loved ones. Jin will keep his promise. He's Jin Rankandel. Jin swore to the man the honor of his family. The attacker's eyes trembled as he listened to Jin's cold voice. There was no choice. The man gave up and told everything. He didn't want anything to happen to his loved ones. They were a group of revolutionaries Kinzello. As soon as he heard this name, Jin remembered that it was a terrorist organization that was active just shortly before his death. The world was overwhelmed by panic when they killed a bunch of people in King Jin. They call themselves revolutionaries, and revolution is for them to overthrow kings and put their own at the head of the whole world. Jin asked the man if they wanted to cause riots in the Jin kingdom by killing the Rankandel cadets. The man replied that he didn't know anything. He was a simple 6. He didn't even know where the main base was, but his group was located right near the beastmen's lands. There were about 24th rank warriors and more magicians. Jin asked his last question. Why did they kidnap Mesa? Just for the sake of propaganda. To promote the revolution, they were ordered to take all the girls alive. The cadets clenched their teeth in anger. Jin pulled Bradamante out of the scabbard, and the attacker closed his eyes. A thud. With this, Jin kept his promise. The head fell to the ground, and Jin swung his sword one last time to wipe the blood from the blade. Jin asked how long it had been since Mesa went missing. About an hour. This meant that they were already close to their camp. Jin ordered the cadets to give first aid to everyone and request reinforcements. The cadets were surprised. Did he really want to go alone? All the cadets raised their voices disapprovingly. According to the now dead attacker, there were 20 members in their squad in total. The cadets were right. Chasing them to save Mesa was reckless, especially if he goes alone. They're just cadets, and cadets often died during the mission. The cadets tried to dissuade Jin from this dangerous venture. Jin calmly looked around, making eye contact with each cadet. Once one of them was captured, Rankandel could not leave him. Jin said he's stronger than they think. He told them to carry out the order. Any objections will be considered insubordination. All the cadets erased their distressed faces. They couldn't say anything more because of Jin's powerful tone and gaze. He called out to Bella. All of the second squad were wounded, so the strongest among them was Bella. Jin told him to be on his guard. Now that everything was said, Jin ran, as time was of the utmost importance. He didn't want to be late. There are about 24th rank warriors in the enemy's squad. Jin's swordsmanship and shadow energy are of the 3rd rank, and magic is of the 4th. He grew up pretty quickly, but now he can't cope with everyone. The main thing was to save Mesa. Therefore, he will try to avoid battles and focus on the search. After calming his breathing, Jin created a ball of mana on his right palm. He planned to use mana to search for enemies. Reconnaissance of the area. As the mana ball on Jin's right hand gradually penetrated into the ground, Jin created a second mana ball on his left hand. This one was partially transparent, as it had the attribute of wind. After the wind blew around Jin for a few seconds, he detected a slight reaction and started moving in that direction. The wind followed the information provided to it by the magic of the earth. The wind was pointing towards the meadow. The kidnappers couldn't have gone far. An arrow was flying at him from the tall grass. Jin effortlessly dodged it and aimed his own in the direction from which it was released. Jin saw 2 warriors and a mage. Jin cut one of the warriors in 2 with his magic. When one of the warriors approached, Jin pulled out his sword and blocked the enemy's sword. At this time, the enemy magician prepared a spell and released it into the genie. Jin didn't escape the attack and took it with his body. The corners of the warrior's lips lifted as he saw the mage spell work. Jin then used the fact that his body was covered by flames to hit the warrior with Bradamante. Jin grabbed the fire whip clinging to his clothes with his hand and extinguished it. Sparks flew around as the mana in the spell scattered to the wind like ashes. Since he had completely absorbed the phoenix's heart, all fire spells of 6-star or lower rank could no longer deal damage to Jin. The magician began to cast a new spell when he realized that Jin had a high resistance to fire magic, an icy shot, the same spell that attacked Jin's carriage on the way to the Garden of Swords. The icicle shot flew towards Jin, but this time it fell apart and fell to the ground without even reaching him. The pendant of the Orgala Demon King, given by the moon, protected Jin. It will be difficult for a magician to penetrate the mana of the pendant with spells of 5 stars or lower. The mage could do nothing but watch as Bradamante's blade sliced through his own flesh. It looks like the people from Canzello weren't trying to hide. They most likely expected that the opponents had no combat experience. Now Jin could also see the tracks of the carriage wheels. Jin stopped for a moment to examine these footprints. Canzello had its own hierarchy. Jin suggested that they divide the loot according to the position in the group. This meant that they would not dare to touch the share of the one who is in charge. So far, there was a chance to save Mesa. Jin was already near the beastmen's lands. Canzello's base was somewhere nearby. In this case, they needed to be distracted and to find the right moment to save Mesa. A ball of fiery mana formed on Jin's hand. It was the same spell that the enemy mage had used earlier. Jin swung the fire whip in all 4 directions. The spell has decent firepower, but its real advantage is that after hitting the target, it is not so easy to separate it. In other words, there was no better spell than this to burn the Sodden Forest. Jin cast the same spells over and over again. Magical arson was a serious crime in this world. However, such restrictions did not matter to Jin Rankandel. As soon as the area was ablaze, Jin summoned wind mana. As soon as he finished using it, a bluish wind filled with mana began to carry the flames forward. As the name suggests, it was a spell that created a huge gust of wind that undulated forward like a wave. Flames engulfed the forest. Initially, he couldn't burn wet trees, but as soon as the flame got big enough, it started to consume everything in its path, wet or not. So, Jin went through the forest, burning it. He hid his body behind the flames, taking advantage of his resistance provided by the Phoenix Heart. Now he could see the building in the distance. It was the headquarters of the Kinzelo branch. People left the building one by one in a panic. Kinzelo's members were running around chaotically. Since the fire had not yet reached the headquarters, it was planned to extinguish it in advance. Jin was observing the situation among the enemies. The person who seemed to be more senior than the others seemed to have noticed something. He began to lead the others and give orders. Jin flew to the commander, who was left alone, like a whistling arrow. He quickly neutralized the enemy by taking the keys from him. When he opened the rusty iron door, the first thing he saw was the entrance to the basement. When he came down the stairs, he saw Mesa with her hands tied. As soon as he saw her, Jin felt relieved. She hasn't experienced anything alarming yet. She was still wearing her cadet uniform. He cut the rope. Mesa didn't understand why Jin was here. It was very dangerous here. Putting one of Mesa's hands on his shoulders, Jin was about to stand up. An explosion sounded. Both started and raised their heads. From this sudden explosion, the entire building trembled. Mesa asked Jin to promise her that if he was in danger, he'd better leave her. She couldn't let Jin get hurt here because of her. Mesa was incredibly serious. Jin nodded silently, but that didn't mean he agreed with Mesa. If he really agreed with her, he wouldn't have come to save her alone. However, he decided that pretending to agree with her was the best way to calm her down in this situation. Jin left the headquarters accompanied by Mesa. Once they were outside, he finally realized what was going on. When he finally came out, he was greeted by the corpses of Kinzelo members. They seemed to have been cut by large claws, as their bodies were covered with scratches and laceration. Jin realized that it was the hands of beastmen from the warrior tribe. Something was slowly coming out of the fiery inferno not far from them. His fur was too white to belong to someone who had just come out of the fire. Height exceeding 2 meters and frighteningly glowing eyes. The White Wolf tribe. Their opponent held a huge hammer in his right hand. Mesa quickly said that she would distract the wolf, so Jin had to leave. Jin hit Mesa on the neck. Her trembling body swayed as she passed out before she could say anything else. The wolf heard everything. He was unhappy that people could not put out the fire. The White Wolf turned to Jin, asking if he was to blame for this. Jin nodded his head. He introduced himself to the beast. He is the son of Shiren Rankandel, Jean Rankandel. Jin told the wolf to tell his name. The beast grinned when he heard the name Rankandel. A few days before the start of the search task, the Rankandel house. The day Jin received the sword from Luna, he actually tried to wake up Bradamante that evening. When he awakened the sword, Jin felt a wave of power overflowing and wrapping around him. However, Murakan intervened and beat him up, so Jin was unable to complete the awakening. This was the first time Jin had seen Murakan genuinely angry and shouting so furiously. Murakan was angry, saying he wasn't ready yet. If Jin tries to awaken the sword now, he will be poisoned by the energy of the shadows. If he doesn't want to die from an overabundance of shadow energy, then he should forget about awakening the sword for now. The wolf was excited about the upcoming battle. Rankandel. Today he will hunt the real Rankandel. The White Wolf also introduced himself. His name was Kyojito Truka. He is a warrior of the Truck family. The White Wolf tribe was created for battles and carnage. An adult White Wolf is at least a warrior of the 6th rank. Everyone knows that the White Wolf tribe can't stand Rankandels, all because a long time ago, the founder of the Rankandel family called their god, the Great White Wolf Javier, to him and killed him. Jin couldn't escape with Mesa. Quajet said that he would sacrifice Jin to Javier, and the soul of their god could rest in peace. Quajet gave Jin a choice: fight him in a fair fight, or he'll tear Jin to pieces while he's running away. Jin filled his sword with aura. He chose a fair fight. Jin made this decision taking into account the characteristics of the White Wolf beastmen. As a rule, they considered people to be simple prey or toys with which they could play. They never showed honor or dignity and brutally killed their prey. However, there are certain situations in which they risk their honor by fighting the enemy. This happens when they consider their enemy strong enough, or a Rankandel is in front of them. In these cases, they try to arrange an honorable duel with their opponent. The beastmen of the White Wolf tribe will put aside all behind-the-scenes methods and treat their opponent with respect. Since those who die in this duel do not experience injustice, they can be offered to Javier on the altar. Quajet charged forward, swinging his hammer. He was incredibly fast, and no one would have thought that this speed came from a carcass with more than 200 kilograms of pure muscle mass. Jin dodged the blow by stepping back with a skillful movement of his legs. Quajet skillfully changed his position to make a crushing attack. Jin could only helplessly retreat from the giant enemy. In those few seconds of exchange, their weapons touched each other only once, but that single blow was enough to make Jin feel like his wrists were about to fall off. No, it wasn't just his wrists. His whole body was burning and aching, from his head to the tips of his toes. He had almost no strength to block Quajet's blows. Although the situation was difficult, Jin believed that he had a chance to win. He had an ace up his sleeve that the enemy didn't even know about. a pendant given by my sister in the energy of shadows, but he wasn't sure it was worth spending the pendant on such a threat. Moreover, if he could not overcome a simple problem like this, then he would have neither the right nor the qualifications to become stronger. All the strong and powerful people Jin knew overcame the deadly battles in their lives and became symbols of strength. In such cases, having a weapon that the enemy did not know about was always an advantage. There were two important things that Quajit didn't know about Jin. The fact is that he could use both shadow energy and magic, but he couldn't use magic. Magic was out of the question. Furthermore, rank 4 magic wouldn't be strong enough to pierce through the thick hide of a white wolf beastman, and if a guardian knight is sent to find out about Kinzello, he will immediately see traces of mana. Then he will be discovered and expelled from the family. There was no other choice. He will forcibly awaken Bradamante with the energy of shadows. The awakening of Bradamante, an exclusive feature available only to the contractor controlling the shadow god's shadow energy, a function that Murakan advised Jin not to use until he reaches the 5th rank of shadow energy. Jin groaned loudly, blocking the heavy blow of Quajit's hammer. Despite Bradamante's perfect defense, the boy's body was at its limit. Quajit praised Jin's sword, but for some reason the sword was not black, like the famous swords of the Rankandels. Quajit raised his hammer high. If this boulder-like weapon falls on Jin, he will undoubtedly die. Jin tried to remember how he felt when he tried to awaken Bradamante. He must remember, Bradamante has awakened. At the moment when he was about to deliver the decisive blow, Quajit felt his vision suddenly darken. It was only a moment, but for some reason it seemed to him that several hours had passed. Quajit couldn't swing the hammer. Time stopped for him for a moment. When he regained consciousness and looked down, his now clear eyes saw a black blade slicing through his body. A black blade that seemed to be colored by shadows in the darkness. Quajit had always wondered before why the Rankandels were famous for their black swords. But now everything became clear. A moment later, Quajit dropped dead. Jin said that the fight was good. Fortunately, Jin successfully woke up Bradamante. Unfortunately, when all the shadows in the area were pulled into him, Jin felt a burning pain, as if his body was being torn into thousands of pieces. Severe dizziness seized him when he began to hear auditory hallucinations. Most of the hallucinations were related to the events of Jin's past life. Things like "you're a disgrace to the family" or "a loser like you shouldn't have been born into our family." Such auditory hallucinations constantly disturbed him. However, such words and slander did not affect the current genie. He completely ignored what his ears heard and focused on the energy of the shadows within himself. At that moment, Murakan's silhouette appeared. He asked Jin about whether he would wallow in the mud poisoned by the energy of shadows. He told him to get up. If Jin loses, it's over. He couldn't resist it forever. Jin had to do something to overcome this crisis. And the answer was obvious: the release of shadow energy. The boy barely managed to sit cross-legged on the ground, after which he began to collect the energy of shadows inside his body in one place. Dark red blood gushed out between his trembling lips, and his eyes completely rolled back, unable to return to their original position. He was constantly coughing and gasping for air. Jin felt like he was walking a fine line between life and death right now. However, he couldn't control the violent and chaotic shadow energy within himself just by releasing the 3rd rank shadow energy. Starting the release, Jin spat out a clot of dark blood and fell. The energy of the shadows surrounding him destroys everything. There was no way to use the release, but it was impossible to give up. He tried again. It didn't work out. One more time. And so on until the moment it doesn't work out. Soon his surroundings regained their original colors. When he exhaled deeply, the energy stopped. She didn't do Jin any more harm. He did it. The pain went away unexpectedly, and it couldn't help but bother. It was too weird. The body hadn't changed in any way, but it was overflowing with shadow energy. Jin could move, but with little effort. I had to pick up Mesa and leave. He found someone. Someone was behind the ruins. Jin saw a terrified young man who raised both hands defensively. He looked frail and weak, as if he had never faced difficulties in life. Jin couldn't help but bow his head in confusion. He begged him not to kill him. At first Jin thought it was someone from Kinzello. The young man was even more scared and gave his name. This person was Sembaram Villa from the Jin Kingdom. Jin was surprised. This was the man they had to find. Jin introduced himself to Sember. As soon as Sember heard Jin's name, his eyes glistened with tears. He was too happy to be saved. The name Rankandel alone was reassuring. Sember said he would never forget Jin's kindness. After receiving the heartfelt thanks, Jin could only stand awkwardly and feel awkward. Ever since the members of Kinzello attacked the cadets, he had completely forgotten about the existence of Sember and their mission to find him. Throwing Mesa's arms over his shoulders, Jin suddenly turned back to face Sember and asked about how it happened that he was captured by Kinzello. They initially thought that Sember was just lost. Sember replied that he was following his beloved. But the thing was, she died 2 years ago. However, the face, the voice, even the 2 moles on her arm, everything is exactly as when she was alive. Maybe he was crazy, but everything Sember said was true. He said he couldn't have been mistaken. Jin already had suspicions about Buber Gaston. An exact copy of the people was similar to his work. They probably wanted to kidnap Sember for money. Was there any connection between Baober and Canzello? The last time Jin ran into him was when he was 10, and here he is again. Something was wrong here. It was necessary to meet with Buber to understand what kind of person he is. Fortunately, his studio was located in the Principality of Kirano. Jin decided that when he moved to the advanced group, he would definitely look in on Buber Gaston. When Sember finished his story, he smiled shyly. He thanked Jin for listening to him. Jin replied that the Guardian Knights would be arriving soon, so it was time to return. Sember thought that Jin had summoned them for him. Sember was touched by Jin's kindness and looked like he would willingly give everything if he asked for it. Jin didn't have the heart to say that it was all for Mace's sake, so he just nodded awkwardly. Ignorance is bliss. At home, Jin was greeted by a joyful Gilly, who congratulated him on the successful completion of the task. Jin was probably tired, so she made him a bath. But before Jin could enter the bathroom, an angry Muraken got in his way. When Jin tried to stroke Murak, the cat bit his fingers. Jin threw Muraken into the wall out of pain and surprise. Muraken started hitting Jin's face with his paws. He was scolding Jin. Muraken has said many times not to awaken Bradamante. He was very worried about him. Jin wanted to make excuses, but Muraken turned into a man and began to move him back and forth. Muraken didn't want to listen to Jin's excuses. In his opinion, nothing could be more important than the life of Solder, its only follower. Jilly tried to stop Muraken. Muraken looked at her with a strange look, and then said that they had problems because she did not bring strawberry cake. Jilly took his hint. Jin objected to Muraken. His friend was abducted right from under his nose. Should he have dropped it? Who knows what would have happened then? Muraken asked that the pendant around his neck was just for beauty. Why didn't he use it? Jin, escaping from Muraken's grip, replied that he did not want to waste this pendant in vain. He may meet much more powerful enemies in the future. Muraken grabbed his head with his hands. An excited Gilly quickly ran up and helped him. Jin wondered how Muraken found out that he was trying to awaken the sword. Muraken replied that the rank of his shadow energy had jumped sharply from 3rd to 4th. And how can I not guess? Jin felt that the energy was overflowing him, but he could not imagine that he would jump a whole rank. Muraken told Jin to thank Solderit for his mercy. A total of 11 people have experienced shadow energy poisoning, and 9 of them died. Jin knew he was one of the survivors, so I asked who the second survivor was. He was thinking about the founder. Muraken replied without much emotion that he was the second survivor, and Temur would have simply died. Jin waved it off, saying that they were similar. He told Muraken not to worry. Jin wasn't ready to experience such pain again. After saying that, he left to wash up. Muraken told Gilly that Jin needed to be starved to death so that he could finally pull himself together. Gilly apologized, saying she needed to cook dinner for Jin. Muraken was left alone. He was very jealous of Jin. Anna Rankandel, the 9th Rankandel Standard Bearer, and Mu Rankandel, the 8th Rankandel Standard Bearer, were chatting among themselves. They had heard the news that Jin was able to defeat a warrior from the White Wolf tribe. But they did not believe this, saying that he had defeated only a bandit who had put on a wolf skin. Mu wondered how Jin managed it. He only reached the 3rd rank. Anna replied that Jin might have been able to defeat him if of course he met the weakest white wolf. Mu objected, saying that even in this case it was impossible. It made even less sense that their mom immediately believed Jin. The 2 disgruntled ladies shook their heads. Meanwhile, the 2 young men were white as a sheet. Needless to say, it was Daytona and Hayton. From the very beginning of their ill-fated relationship with Jin in the Castle of the Storm, the twins could not see Jin as a younger brother. To them, Jin was a monster. Hayton whispered to Daytona that maybe Jin really killed the White Wolf. Daytona replied that it was impossible, no matter how much Jin was a monster. But the problem was not that, but that Jin was moving to an advanced group. If he studies with them, then they are definitely finished. Despair was born in the twins' eyes when they clearly lost the will to live. In truth, deep down they hoped that Jin would fail miserably in his mission. They expected that his promotion would be delayed due to failure. And in the meantime, the twins would train harder than ever to become stronger. And once Jin finally moves into the middle class, they won't have to tremble in fear of their little brother. However, it was all over for them. Jin not only successfully rescued the missing man, but also defeated the White Wolf. In fact, Jin was considered a hero among the elementary class cadets. The twins lowered their heads again and sighed. They were fully aware that they were below Jin in the food chain. While the brothers stood in confusion, Mu and Anna snorted and grinned. Mu asked if they were afraid of Jin. Anna said with a smile not to lie to her. Her face quickly changed, becoming menacing when she said she hated being lied to. She hates them so much that she's ready to rip out their tongues. Daytona and Hayton replied in a trembling voice that they were afraid of Jin. Anna asked if they wanted their older sisters to help them. She told them to take their slaves. They could use them. The twins' eyes sparkled with delight. In an advanced group, everything obeys the laws of the jungle. Both knights of the 3rd and 5th rank are engaged here. Newcomers are mixed with those who have been here for 10 years. Mew and Anna chose several cadets and turned them into their slaves. The sisters told them to take the slaves and show the place to the youngest. They didn't like him either, and if they could not cope with it, then they could not wait for mercy. Relaxing out of the bath, Jin thought about the fruits of his last mission. He strengthened the admiration and faith of the cadets in him. Where else would someone find a Rankandel who would voluntarily sacrifice his life to save a simple cadet? Normally, 100 cadets would have to risk their lives to save one master. Many of the novice cadets had great potential. Meza and Bellup were clearly very promising, but also most of the cadets involved in the mission were also very gifted. None of them will ever forget Jin's kindness. Saving Mesa wasn't a calculated plan. Jin lived 100 years, considering his past life. If Jin hadn't saved Mesa during this mission, he would have been tormented by guilt and shame for a long time. He didn't regress in order to survive such a life. He had experienced more than enough feelings of helplessness in his first life. Jin completed the first task, so it was finally decided to transfer him to the advanced group. In addition, his shadow energy has reached the 4th rank. If he wants to use it properly, then he should reach the 6th rank in fencing in 5 years. The knights of the 6th rank are excellent swordsmen, the 7th are masters. However, there are countless masters around the world, which is not surprising given that 2 billion people live on the continent. Those who have reached the 8th rank and above are considered an exception to the rule. For 2 billion inhabitants of the continent, there are hardly 100 who have reached the 9th or 10th rank, and only one was able to go even further. A demigod, a star knight. This man was Jin's father, Shiren Rankandel. In this life, he can also become a star knight. No, he will surpass him. This was Jin's firm intention. Jin was called by his mom. Rosa Rankandel was doing paperwork when Jin appeared in front of her. She was very pleased with his results. She received Petro's report. Jin refused her advice to move to another room. Only the child who would become the next head could use these chambers. It's been empty since Joshua lived in it when he was younger. It's time for Jin to take it too. Jin thanked her. He replied that he could not accept it. No matter how good the room was, it remained just 4 walls. She was too big and luxurious for him. Rosa wanted to convince him again, but Jin replied that he had already decided everything. She tapped her fingers on the table for a bit, and then released Jin. Left alone, Rosa Rankandel thought, was there no greed in her youngest son? Or is there too much of it? What she offered was a room for those children who would become the head of the Rankandel family in the future. She was sure that Jin also knew about the support he would receive from the moment he entered this room. However, he will also become a target for those who have not received this opportunity. Jin probably realized that she was testing him. She will look forward to his progress in the intermediate class. Jin came out of his room with Bradamante on his hip. He was going to check out the cadets he would train with starting tomorrow in the intermediate training class. The cadets stood in front of the genie. Although they pretended that everything was fine, tension and anxiety could be seen in their eyes. Starting tomorrow, they will be transferred to an intermediate training class. It consisted of several factions. They found a place in his faction. They will get into territorial battles and face aggression. They knew better than anyone else that they were the only people in Jin's faction. They also knew that because of this they would become objects of persecution, threats, and coercion. It was a natural phenomenon. Although the other cadets could not torment the pure-blooded Rankandel, they could still target his faction. Jin told them not to be afraid. After all, he wasn't going to just watch if something happened. All of this will disappear once he completely restrains the intermediate class. Up to this point, he had ordered them to move in groups of 3, even if they were not in training. They also shouldn't have acted alone. The cadets answered with resolute faces. Zed Rankandel stood in front of the cadets. He was the eldest member of the Rankandel family, a knight of the 8th rank, the younger brother of Shiren Rankandel. 10 recruits were accepted this year, and 27 of them dropped out. Zed spoke with a dissatisfied look, standing on the platform. He was unhappy that there were more dropouts than newcomers. He told the newcomers to gain experience from their mentors in the intermediate class. Zed only taught them swordsmanship and evaluated their results. They have to deal with all the troubles on their own, except for the murder. Zed asked the mentors a question. What does he always repeat? Rankandel doesn't need weaklings. The mid-level cadets suddenly shouted in unison and continued to chant the motto while looking at the newcomers. Moreover, there was obvious malice in their looks. Jin's cadets were pressured by their stares and shouts, which made it difficult for them to keep their heads straight. Anyone around the world would also feel oppressed by a ceremony in which elders greet them with a painful warning. Among the group of people shouting the motto were the twins. There were several knights with 4 and 5 stars standing around them, who were part of the Mew and Anna factions. They tried to intimidate the recruits, but Jin has to let them know that they got it all wrong. The singing continued endlessly. The mid-level cadets looked like they were going to shout out a warning until all the newbies lowered their heads. Suddenly, Jin stepped forward and approached the twins. His steps were light and relaxed, as if he was out for a walk. Why did he go there? The twins told each other not to be afraid, because their older sisters supported them. The twins exchanged glances and started screaming louder than ever. Jin's pace didn't slow down. It seemed that he wouldn't stop until he was inches away from the twins. The other mid-level cadets shifted their gaze from the newcomers to Junior Master Rankandel. Jin drew Bradamante out of nowhere and waved his sword. The deafening singing of the cadets instantly stopped. Their jaws dropped as they watched the amazing scene in front of them in shock. The twins were petrified like stone statues. Jin chopped off a human hand, a hand belonging to one of the cadets standing around the twins. As a member of Anna's faction, he was a 5-star knight. In other words, he was at the top of the food chain in the middle class. Until now, there was no way the cadet could predict or defend against this sudden attack, even if someone was a pure-blooded Rankandel. Who in their right mind would swing a sword on their first day in intermediate class? Besides, during the preemptive welcome ceremony organized by Zed Rankandel, when blood gushed from the cadet's wound, the twins couldn't do anything because they panicked. The heat and excitement that had engulfed the training ground a few minutes ago had completely disappeared. All 150 pairs of eyes were focused on Gina, but the boy in question did not give any explanation for his actions and simply sheathed his sword. Instead, he said in a restrained tone to call a doctor. Everyone stood silently in shock as the cadets' moans echoed on the training ground. Other cadets simply could not believe what they saw, doubting their eyes and ears. The twins began to demand explanations loudly, although the twins objected to Jin's actions. Their eyes were trembling anxiously. All the twins could think about right now was how to deal with this problem, no matter what. Otherwise, they would have had to endure 2 disasters. First, on the first day, they allowed one of their older sister's slaves to be injured. In that case, their sisters would have beaten them to death. Secondly, if they don't immediately avenge the cadet and take action against Jin, their dignity will sink to the bottom. The news that the twins had been humiliated by their younger brother in front of all the other mid-level cadets would instantly spread throughout the Rankandel house. Goosebumps ran down their backs as they looked into the calm Jin's eyes. But they could not allow themselves to recoil from fear. How will they explain themselves to their sisters? We are terribly sorry. We were afraid of the youngest, even though your slaves were with us. As if they could say something like that. In the end, the Tone twins drew their swords at the same time. Jin completely ignored the twins and turned to the cadet holding the bloody hand. The cadet raised his head and stared at Jin. Jin asked for his name. The cadet's name was Kajin Romero. Jin asked if Kajin knew why he had drilled his arm off. Daytona pointed his sword at Jin, telling him to draw his sword. Jin tilted his head slightly to meet the twins' gaze. He made it clear to them that he was talking to Kajin right now. He would accept their duel later, so he told them to sit tight. Hayton blurted out in a fit of rage, calling Kajin his disciple. Hayton almost instinctively put his hand over his mouth. Hayton's words meant that Kajin was part of their faction. Jin said he crippled him because he was looking at him bloodthirsty. Silence descended on the training ground again. The twins could only stare in surprise with their mouths and eyes wide open. They planned to fight Jin, but got stuck in his teep. After a verbal altercation, Kajin Romero has just become part of the Gemini faction. In other words, Jin's actions just now were not just a rebellious outburst, but rather part of a long tradition within the Rankandel family. It was part of their battle for hegemony. Jin suddenly screamed, raising his head. He said that they could point their swords at him or suddenly attack him, as he did himself. But they should keep in mind that if he sees even a hint of hostility, he will not hesitate to respond in kind. Zed turned to Jean. Everyone expected that the instructor would reproach the boy. The twins especially hoped that their uncle would severely punish their brother. Jin didn't call him uncle intentionally. His father and uncle were similar. It seemed that all the older families preferred to be treated with respect according to their rank. Zed asked Jin about how he dared to do such a thing in front of him. Color returned to the twins' faces as they froze. Zed Rankandel. Their awe-inspiring uncle. Zed's thunderous roar could make anyone shudder in fear, even their monstrous little brother. Jin replied that he was sure that he would not fight with the twins, but with him. A white sword formed in Zed's hand. He pointed that sword at Jin. Zed demanded an explanation, and depending on the answer, he could decapitate him right on the spot.